I stand here today as an accomplished man, a veteran, a college student, an entrepreneur, a mentor, and a father of three, the last of which I'm most proud. But nothing in my earliest life positioned me to be here today. Let me tell you why. It goes back a couple of generations, beginning with my grandparents and their 4 kids, 3 sons and a daughter, raised in the heart of Los Angeles, California. While they started off well, in time they would divorce, and their children would remain with my grandfather. Their little girl, who would one day be my mom, was about 5 years old at the time. She felt abandoned by the person she needed most, her mother. She carried that sense of loss with her for years, and this would shape the way that she would live her life and how her future turned out. 4 years later, though, when my mom was 9, her mother regained custody, but their reunion was short-lived. My grandmother passed away when my mom was 15, leaving her to confront with the pain and abandonment once again, without the resilience to move forward with strength. Overcome by grief, she turned to smoking, drinking, and experimenting with heroin in high school, seeking comfort in all the wrong places. She got caught up in a lifestyle of gangs, of drugs, of money during the cocaine-filled 80s. 19 when she had her first child, a baby girl. My mom was still at home with my grandfather, though. And despite her new responsibilities, she continued living recklessly, often leaving her child behind with family. She had another baby girl, leaving her with different people as well, so she could return back to the streets. And her addiction became relentless. By the time my mom was 26, she started using cocaine, which quickly escalated to crack cocaine. This cost her custody of her children and her daughters. Her life continued to spiral out of control. She would experience several stillbirths, and one day, she would abandon a child in the hospital. That was me. I was born addicted to opiates and treated for neonatal abstinence syndrome, opiate addiction, a condition caused by exposure to drugs in the womb. Doctors use medicine and what they call TLC, tender loving care, consisting of loving care, swaddling, rocking, skin-to-skin contact to treat this condition. But in my case, there was no mother, there was no father, there was no aunt, there was no uncle to provide that care. Instead, nurses tended to me for weeks until I was placed in foster care. Then I bounced between foster homes, reportedly neglected, abused, and malnourished until I was about 3. I was transracially adopted by a white Mormon family in Utah who changed my birth name and raised me in a predominantly white community where I faced frequent racism in my immediate family and my extended family, despite efforts of my parents trying to provide me with a loving home. I recall Christmas morning, dancing to Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. I remember camping trips and hunting and hours upon hours of church. However, I've never forgotten my newly designated grandfather refusing to look at me, to touch me, or to talk to me. On Halloween one year, a teenager called me a racial slur and spit in my face as he ran by and took something from me. Not surprisingly, I struggled from the start in my new home and was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder and ADHD. I experienced controversial treatments such as holding therapy, where you were agitated to a point of agitation and then held as a form of bonding. It's now illegal. By the time I was 5, I had developed an addiction to codeine that was in cough syrup. I went to a rehabilitation center for children when I was 5. By the time I hit my teen years, 13 through 18, I was in and out of detention centers and back in foster care, attending individual and group therapy. This is where the seeds of resilience were planted. I was what staff would call therapized, meaning I'd been in too many sessions and I could tell you what you wanted to hear. And I would recall my therapist, Liz, touching my head and touching my heart, saying, take that from here to here, in a way to inspire me to feel my feelings as a young boy that didn't cry. Through these programs, I learned how deeply hurt I was and about the coping mechanisms that I was sabotaging my happiness with. However, my therapist ingrained in me that we all have ups and downs, yet choices have consequences, and that there are 2 paths that I could take: the easy and fast, or the harder but worth it. By the time I graduated high school, I'd earned an educational scholarship and was ready to pursue a degree in psychology to be a therapist, just like the therapists before me, and help others. While the journey had already been tough, in getting here, it seemed like I was finally on a steady path. But life had other plans. Shortly after starting college, I found out my girlfriend was pregnant, and we got married, 19. Growing up Mormon, premarital sex and a child out of wedlock, very taboo. Hence, stepping up to get married to protect the family that I started. 2 weeks after my wedding, my adoptive father passed away. My adoptive mother then presented me with a letter from the state of California stating that I had 6 siblings. I remember sitting at a college library, going on to MySpace. You remember that, right? And sending this black face a message. Reconnecting with my mother was something I searched for my entire life. My entire life. I was always searching her name in phone books, dreaming she was around the next corner, or excited that the next black face was going to be family. I was excited, but also still hurt. But for her, it brought up shame and the abandonment around abandoning a child. And now having to answer to me. We all took some steps forward as a family, but they were slow, and sometimes we had to take some steps back over the years. And while I connected with my biological family virtually, I finally experienced the joy of actually meeting my own flesh and blood. My son, DeMarcus, who was born 2007 on the 4th of July. And it was beautiful. I was one of those parents who read What to Expect When You're Expecting. And when my son arrived, I was more than excited to try my hand at fatherhood. I enlisted in the Army in early 2008, in an effort to provide well for my family after losing my job. And soon after, we welcomed our second son, Trazon, that year. I was stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a cavalry scout, still drawing upon the lessons learned in my teens. The military also taught me the values of loyalty, of duty, of respect, of selfless service, of honor, of integrity, and most of all, personal courage. Amid all of this, my sister called me one day, telling me that my cousin had been murdered back in Compton. Although on active duty, I was issued special leave to attend the funeral. This would be the first time that I would meet anybody in my family. I met my mother, I met my father, I met my cousins, I met my 6 siblings, all at one time at a funeral. Now I was glad to be home, finally, but confused about who I was and actually scared to face my mom, as months previously she had called me for some money, and I later realized she was still going through her addiction. As a cavalry scout with the 3rd Infantry Division, 5th Battalion, 7th Cavalry, I deployed to Baghdad, Iraq at 21. On hundreds of missions, I saw firsthand the ugliness of war. I saw firsthand the strength and resilience of soldiers and innocent civilians, as well as the precious value of life. After leaving active duty at 22, I joined the National Guard as a chaplain's assistant. I moved to Boston and to pursue my new life's calling after the military. I went back to school and graduated from Southern New Hampshire University. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and more recently, I've started my master's in organizational leadership. During the pandemic, I was furloughed from a government agency, and determined to survive and provide for my family, I invested my 401k, my stocks, and savings into starting my own business. Leaving the corporate world was scary. I needed benefits and I needed insurance, but I also needed to find the true calling of me as a father. And by now, I also had my daughter, Azalea. At one point, in dire need, I discovered a Facebook group called Dads with Daughters by a nonprofit called Fathering Together. This was like the first time that I'd ever had a fathers-only support group where we talked about being as intentional about being connected to our children as we did about our executive roles in the workplace. I founded the Comeback Kid Mentorship Program, soon to be a nonprofit as we speak, which combines social-emotional learning, mentorship, and a community of resources to inspire and teach resilience to at-risk youth, many of whom are transracial adoptees, or in the juvenile justice system, just like I was. In the last 4 years, I personally mentored over 50 youth, from personalized interventions, group sessions, or serving on the board of On Your Feet Foundation, who provides support to birth mothers who have given their children up for adoption. I also co-own Vet Run Movers, a moving and junk removal company. We partner with veteran organizations to support at-risk and homeless veterans and provide second chances to felons through workforce development programs. So how did I get here? I've mentioned resilience a few times or two, but it was resilience, 4 sources of it in fact, as described to me by my childhood therapist, that got me here. Here's what they taught me and what you can focus on too, no matter what you're facing. There's relational resilience. This is the ability to draw motivation from others and from the responsibilities you have to others. Despite the challenges, I found strength throughout my own life, through my relationships, from the nurses who cared for me as an infant, my adoptive family, caseworkers, therapists, and mentors like Christian. I've had the same therapist for the last 7 years. But to be real with you, the moment I knew my trajectory had changed was when I became a father. These connections motivated me to keep going, and I knew what was possible. Next up is street resilience. Growing up, I faced discrimination, poverty, and the pain of poor choices. But instead of letting those experiences crush me, I used them as fuel to push forward. My street experiences taught me toughness and determination. And then there's resource resilience. Resilience can be strengthened by accessing the resources around you, both visible and invisible. For me, it was finding educational opportunities, attending therapy, and even rediscovering my biological family, because identity is important. And finally, rock bottom resilience. Even at my lowest points, I believed in my ability no matter the circumstances. No matter how hard life got, I never gave up. I fought hopelessness. I fought PTSD. I fought survivor's grief and kept moving forward. Now, this belief that you can rise from rock bottom is what I want to leave you here with today. Resilience is not something that we are born with. It's something that we learn. And it's a skill built over time through hardship, perseverance, and faith in ourselves. And it's available to anyone willing to fight for it. But here's the thing. We have to be willing to be open to it, with our hearts and minds open, and actually do the work. And with my therapist's help, I was. Now, that doesn't mean everything's gone smoothly as I moved forward by any means. I've been through failed marriages, and honestly, the pain of co-parenting long distance is tough. They say we are babies raising babies, and I can definitely attest to that. But today, I'm a proud father of 3. DeMarcus is now 17 and finishing his licensed nursing assistant program and holds down a great job. Trayzon is a sports star, muscular, handsome. And Azalea, my princess, is 10. She loves dancing, singing, and African hand drumming. You know, people always told me I'd be dead or in jail. And throughout my teenage years, I definitely tested that, but I tested it again when I deployed to Iraq in 2009. Fast forward to 2021, when my big sister flew me back to Los Angeles for my 33rd birthday. We went to my mother's house. And for the first time, she and I sat on her bed and snuggled. She opened up to me about the moment she had to leave at the hospital. Oof. When I was born. How I clung to her hospital gown. And how much it broke her heart. But now her wounds have healed, and they're healing. I got sick the night before my birthday, and my mom, being the nurturing figure that I had always known, but not always knew, took care of me and got me some medicine. And now here we are in 2024, celebrating her first year clean. So I stand here today, living proof that kids like me can come back stronger by drawing on our resilience and recognizing the consequences of the choices we do have. Life is hard. Really hard, right? We've got to heal and then advocate for ourselves. And then resilience and discipline will carry you to nirvana. Thank you.